The hum of the old hangar fan mixed with the faint smell of aviation fuel as Emma Hayes adjusted her headset. Her father, Robert Hayes, stood beside her with that calm yet sharp look in his eyes, the same look that could cut through a storm. He was a decorated helicopter pilot with a mind full of unorthodox ideas about the sky, and today was another of their weekend training sessions at the small private airfield that had become their second home. The world outside thought helicopters were little more than slow-moving targets for faster aircraft, but Robert had spent years teaching Emma something different. He believed that the helicopter in the right hands could be a predator rather than prey. The first lesson he drilled into her was that the enemy's expectations could be their greatest weakness. Most fighter pilots assumed they would meet a helicopter flying low and hugging the ground. But what if that helicopter decided to fight back in ways they had never seen before? That thought was the seed he planted in her mind. And over the years, it grew into a philosophy. Emma learned to think of airspace not as a flat battlefield but as a living three-dimensional arena. She studied angles, speeds, altitudes, and how each could be used to force the enemy into positions they did not want to be in. While other kids her age were at the movies or the mall, she was in a simulator practicing sudden altitude drops, high bank turns, and terrain masking maneuvers that could hide her from radar until it was too late for an opponent to react. Her father often reminded her that skill alone would not win a fight in the air. You had to unnerve the other pilot, make them feel uncertain. The moment doubt entered their mind, their training would start to betray them. She would watch old combat footage with him, analyzing not just the moves but the psychology of each pilot, how hesitation or overconfidence decided the outcome long before the final shot was fired. When Robert was deployed for the last time, Emma was 17. She remembered the moment the knock came at the door, and the officer standing there with eyes full of sorrow. Her father had been killed during a mission overseas. The details were vague, but Emma knew he had gone down doing exactly what he believed in, pushing the boundaries of what a helicopter could do. The grief was a storm that nearly drowned her, but inside it there was also a flame, a promise that she would carry his ideas forward. Years later, that promise shaped her path. After graduating from the academy with top honors in aerospace engineering, she went through pilot training with a level of focus that caught the attention of her instructors. She devoured every scrap of information about fighter jet performance, missile guidance systems, and air combat doctrine, subjects that her peers thought irrelevant to helicopter operations. But Emma was never interested in being average. She was building towards something nobody else saw coming. By the time she was assigned to the 14th Attack Aviation Regiment, she already had a quiet reputation. Some saw her as a talented young pilot, others as a risk-taker who flirted with the edge of acceptable tactics. But those who flew with her noticed the way she treated the helicopter not just as a machine for ground attack, but as a weapon capable of holding its own against threats far above its weight class. It was as though every sortie was both a mission and an experiment. She began volunteering for assignments in contested zones, where enemy radar screens were thick with activity and airspace control was never certain. And while most pilots preferred the safety of fighter escort, Emma often operated alone, testing her theories in real conditions. She found ways to weave between enemy surveillance, to appear in places she was not supposed to be, and vanish just as quickly. In the mess hall some called her Valkyrie, a name she neither encouraged nor denied. What kept her going was the memory of her father's voice, telling her that the sky did not belong to whoever had the faster aircraft or the bigger gun. It belonged to the one who could rewrite the fight in real time. Every time she strapped into the cockpit she felt the weight of that legacy, and the quiet thrill of knowing that sooner or later, she would face the kind of challenge that would prove once and for all whether he had been right. That challenge was coming, though she could not yet see it. It would arrive in the form of a desperate call for help, a small group of soldiers pinned down in a hostile valley, and a swarm of enemy fighters racing toward them. It would be the day when Emma Hayes would have to decide whether to follow orders or follow the truth her father had given her, and the decision she made would change the way the military thought about helicopters forever. The midday sun burned through the haze over the mountain range, casting sharp shadows into the winding valleys below as Emma Hayes guided her Apache through the thin air, the rotors slicing the sky with a steady rhythm. She had been assigned as overwatch for a special operations team operating deep in contested territory. Their mission, simple in theory: gather intelligence on enemy supply routes and exfiltrate before anyone knew they were there. The call sign of the ground unit was Falcon 7, a small squad of 6 soldiers moving through rugged terrain with precision and silence. Emma monitored their position on her display as she kept the Apache in a slow orbit above a nearby ridge where she could see without being seen. The valley stretched out like a scar between jagged hills, its edges dotted with crumbling stone buildings and dry riverbeds that could hide anything from a rifleman to a missile launcher. For the first hour, everything moved according to plan. Falcon 7 reported steady progress and no contact. The radio chatter was minimal, just the occasional status update from the team leader. Emma kept her eyes scanning both the ground and the sky, her sensors sweeping for movement. She knew from experience that quiet missions could turn violent without warning. The change came with a burst of static on her comms, followed by the strained voice of the Falcon 7 leader. Contact multiple hostiles on our position, requesting immediate cover fire. Emma's eyes flicked to her tactical screen where red markers began to bloom around the team like blood drops in water. More markers appeared farther out, converging quickly. The enemy force was larger than anything the squad could hope to fight off. She was already turning the Apache toward them when another voice broke in, the mission commander's tone sharp and urgent. Valkyrie, we have enemy aircraft lifting off from a base 40 miles north. Multiple fast movers inbound to your sector. Orders are to break off and return to base immediately. Emma's hands tightened on the controls. Return to base meant abandoning Falcon 7 to be overrun. She took a breath, steadying the frustration rising in her chest. She pictured the 6 soldiers pinned down in that valley, their escape routes closing by the second. The nearest friendly fighters were at least 20 minutes away. In 20 minutes, Falcon 7 would be nothing more than a lost transmission in the mission log. Negative, command, Emma said, her voice calm but unshakable. Falcon 7 is still in contact. I am engaging. Valkyrie, that's suicide, the commander shot back. You are an attack helicopter. You cannot go against enemy fighters. Emma's eyes scanned her weapons panel. 16 Hellfire missiles, over 1,000 rounds of 30mm ammunition, and 4 short-range air-to-air missiles. She rarely had reason to use the air-to-air loadout, but this was different, and she had been preparing for a moment like this for years. The radio crackled again as Falcon 7's leader called out their position. They were taking fire from multiple sides, 2 wounded, low on ammunition, the enemy pushing closer by the minute. The sound of gunfire filtered faintly through the comms, the urgency in their voice leaving no room for hesitation. On her display, Emma saw the approaching aircraft. 6 radar returns in 2 tight formations, altitude 15,000 feet, moving fast. They were well flown and well armed, probably expecting to wipe the sky clean of anything slower than them. They had no idea the helicopter below was waiting for them with a plan they had never seen before. Her mind shifted into the mode her father had taught her. Think about what the enemy expects, and then erase that picture. They think you are slow and predictable, so be fast and invisible. They think you will flee, so make them chase into places they cannot control. She climbed the Apache higher than usual, using a nearby ridgeline to block her heat signature. The first enemy transmission bled into her headset, their leader telling the formation to prepare for a quick strike. 1 lone helicopter, they said, an easy target. They were confident, too confident, and that was the crack she intended to drive open. She checked Falcon 7's position one last time. They were still holding on, but the red threat indicators around them were tightening into a noose. She was out of time, her eyes fixed on the distant blips racing toward her location. She was ready to make the sky a trap. The air at 8,000 feet shimmered in the heat rising from the jagged earth below as Emma Hayes positioned her Apache along the spine of a narrow ridge, the blades thumping a low rhythm that seemed to echo the steady beat of her heart. The incoming fighters were still miles out but closing fast, their formation textbook perfect for hunting low-flying aircraft. She knew exactly what they saw on their instruments, a single helicopter lingering in contested airspace, too slow to escape and too exposed to hide. They would expect a short fight, a clean kill, and a quick return to base, but Emma had no intention of playing her part in that script. She eased the Apache forward, using the ridge to mask her heat signature from their sensors, keeping her altitude higher than any Apache pilot normally dared in. Hostile skies. The first blip in the enemy formation broke off, slightly taking the lead on the attack run. Emma watched the track on her display, counting down the seconds. In her mind, she thought of her father's voice reminding her that confidence could be more dangerous to a pilot than enemy fire. The enemy leader rolled into position, expecting her to hover below, waiting for him to swoop in and fire, but she was already climbing just enough to put herself in a perfect launch window. When the MiG cleared the ridge line, Emma surged upward, revealing her position. Only at the last instant she loosed 2 missiles in quick succession, each streaking toward the fighter in a trail of heat and smoke. The pilot had no time to react. The aircraft erupted in a burst of flame and debris, the wreckage tumbling toward the valley floor. The radio came alive with shouts from the enemy formation, their leader gone in the opening seconds, confusion replacing their certainty. Emma banked sharply, pulling back behind the ridge before their sensors could lock on again. The trick was not just in the kill, but in the sudden shift of momentum. She could feel it even from miles away, the first ripple of doubt. 2 of the remaining fighters shifted into a pincer maneuver, sweeping wide to close in from opposite directions. She had seen this move in countless simulations. The enemy relied on speed and angle to trap her with no escape, but speed was a weapon she could turn against them. She dropped the Apache low, hugging the ridge line until one of the fighters passed directly overhead, never seeing her until it was too late. A Stinger missile shot straight up into its exhaust, the explosion blotting the sky with black smoke. The second fighter broke hard away from the blast, pulling into a climb that exposed its underbelly. Emma had already calculated the path. She knew where he would go before he moved. Her next missile leapt from the rails, striking home and sending the aircraft spinning down in a fiery arc toward the valley floor. Her comms caught a fragment of the enemy channel. Disbelief and frustration bleeding through their words. A helicopter could not be doing this, not against trained fighter pilots. Emma let the faintest edge of satisfaction slip into her breathing. She remembered her father's lesson: never let them believe they are in control, make them feel hunted, and they will make mistakes. Now the remaining fighters were losing cohesion, breaking from their tight formation, each moving on instinct rather than coordination. The advantage was shifting, and she intended to press it. The valley was her arena, and the sky above it her trap. The flight back to base felt strangely quiet, the chaos of the valley now just a fading echo in Emma Hayes' ears. The Apache's instruments glowed softly in the cockpit, the hum of the engine steady and familiar beneath her boots. She kept her gaze sweeping the sky out of habit, though she knew no one would be coming after her now. The last MiG had fled at full throttle, and the ground forces were scattered. What remained was the long return and the inevitable questions that would come with it. The sun was dipping low, painting the horizon with streaks of gold and crimson as she crossed into friendly airspace. The ridges and valleys she had used to outmaneuver her enemies now bathed in warm light that made them seem almost peaceful. She thought of the moments just hours ago when those same slopes had hidden missiles and gunfire, and how narrow the line between survival and defeat had been. Her father's words echoed in her mind, the ones he had told her in those early training days: the most dangerous enemy is the one you never expect to fight back. When the base finally came into view, she could see movement along the flight line more than usual for this hour. People were gathering, mechanics in oil-stained coveralls, pilots in flight suits, even a few command staff in crisp uniforms. As she guided the Apache toward its pad, the sight struck her with a strange mix of pride and unease. She had not flown this mission for applause, but for the 6 soldiers who would not be coming home in body bags because of what she had done. She set the Apache down smoothly, the rotors slowing as she powered down the systems and opened the canopy. Stepping into the fading sunlight, Colonel Michael Torres was already striding toward her, his expression caught between disbelief and something like respect. "Valkyrie," he said in a low voice, "what you did out there defies every engagement protocol I have ever seen, yet it worked." Behind him, she caught sight of several fighter pilots watching her. One of them, Captain Daniel Wright, a veteran of more than 200 sorties, stepped forward, shaking his head slowly. "I have never seen a helicopter move like that, never seen one hunt fighters like they were prey. Where did you learn that kind of air-to-air game?" Emma felt the weight of the small photograph in her flight suit pocket. She did not take it out, but her answer was clear: from someone who taught me that the fight belongs to whoever rewrites it in their favor. In the following days, the mission report became the subject of closed-door briefings across multiple commands. Officers and analysts pored over the telemetry, the gun camera footage, and the radio logs. Some questioned whether it could be repeated. Others wanted to know exactly how to train more pilots to think the way she did. She was called into rooms where men with rows of ribbons on their chests asked her to walk them step by step through the fight. The terrain choices, the timing, the split-second decisions she had made. The more she explained, the more it became clear this was not a lucky day or a fluke. This was the result of years of preparation, a blend of technical skill, tactical study, and a willingness to break patterns that the enemy had come to rely on. 2 weeks later, she was summoned to Torres's office, the blinds drawn, the air heavy with the faint smell of coffee and paper. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were orders transferring her to a classified program under the Army's Experimental Aviation Division. The assignment was simple in description but huge in scope. She was to lead the development and testing of advanced helicopter tactics for use against air threats, not just in theory but in live exercises. "So," she said, scanning the orders, "I thought I was just a helicopter pilot." Torres allowed himself a rare smile. "After what you accomplished, Hayes, you are not just anything, you are a tactical innovator, and it is time to give you the tools to teach others." 6 months later, the title of major rested on her shoulders, and she stood at the head of the 1st Experimental Attack Aviation Battalion. The hangars around her housed machines modified for speed, agility, and unconventional armament, their crews trained to operate beyond the standard engagement envelope. The old thinking that helicopters could not challenge fighters was being dismantled day by day in the simulators and on the live ranges. Emma drilled her pilots not just on flying but on thinking like the adversary. She had them study fighter tactics, missile engagement zones, and the psychology of pilots trained to expect the same outcomes every time they took to the sky. She showed them how to use the terrain not just for cover but as a weapon, how to control the pace of a fight, how to make an enemy believe they were safe right up until the moment they were not. Not everyone believed at first. Some called her ideas reckless, others warned that trying to turn helicopters into air superiority platforms was a waste of resources, but those same voices grew quiet after the first exercises where her pilots flipped mock engagements on their heads, ambushing and defeating aggressor aircraft that had been briefed to hunt them. Emma knew there would always be resistance to change, but she also knew that real progress was never born from comfort. It came from those moments when someone was willing to face impossible odds and find a way to win. She had lived that truth in the valley, and she carried it now as both an instructor and a leader. The soldiers she trained would carry those same lessons into future battles, and somewhere out there in a contested sky another pilot would find themselves outnumbered and outgunned, but armed with the knowledge that they did not have to accept defeat. Emma Hayes had proven it once, and she knew it would be proven again. The sky belonged to those willing to claim it, rewrite it, and if necessary turn it into a weapon that the enemy never saw coming, and when that happened the fight would never be the same. The sound of the rotors was steady in Emma Hayes's ears, but beneath it she could feel the pulsing tension in her own blood, each turn of the Apache's blades keeping her balance between predator and target. The remaining fighters were no longer the unified machine they had been minutes ago, their sleek silhouettes now scattered above the valley like startled birds, each pilot searching the sky for a glimpse of the helicopter that had already torn their formation apart. Emma moved along the ridgeline with deliberate care, keeping the Apache's movements unpredictable, small climbs followed by sharp drops, weaving left then snapping right. She knew the first rule of survival was to deny the enemy a pattern. If they could not anticipate her position, they could not control the engagement. One MiG broke off and dropped low behind her, its pilot confident that the helicopter's blind rear arc would give him the perfect kill shot. Emma had been waiting for such a move. Her rear sensors had been tracking him for the last 30 seconds. She knew his closure rate, his altitude, and the precise moment he would commit to the shot. Instead of fleeing, she pulled the cyclic hard, executing a sudden reversal that twisted the Apache's nose back toward the incoming threat. The G-forces shoved her against the harness, but her hands were steady on the controls. The MiG pilot never had time to react. The 30mm cannon roared, spitting armor-piercing rounds into the oncoming fuselage. The burst tore through the cockpit canopy and engine housing. The explosion that followed lit the air in a hot orange bloom, the wreckage tumbling toward the rocks below. Another radar blip faded from her display. The surviving Sukhoi chose a different tactic, climbing high to gain distance before launching a missile from beyond visual range. Emma saw the launch spike on her sensors and immediately dove toward the valley floor, her mind racing through the missile's envelope. She popped flares and chaff in a staggered rhythm, letting the hot trails confuse the seeker head. The missile shot past, exploding harmlessly against the far ridge, dust and stones spraying into the wind. The smoke trail gave her an idea. She banked into it, following its arc upward toward the Sukhoi's position. The moment her targeting reticle locked, she fired a Hellfire missile at maximum range. The Sukhoi pilot banked hard left, but the missile tracked relentlessly, catching him just as he leveled. The detonation shattered the aircraft into shards that spun down through the thinning clouds. Only one MiG remained circling at a cautious distance, weighing the odds of pressing an attack against the machine that had already destroyed his comrades. Emma considered pressing the advantage, but she knew her real mission still waited below. The soldiers of Falcon 7 were still pinned in the valley, and the longer she stayed in the air trading shots, the more danger they were in. Still, she opened the radio link to the MiG's frequency, her voice calm, even cold. You can run now, or you can join them, your choice. The pause was brief before the MiG began a wide turn, its afterburners lighting as it raced toward friendly airspace at maximum speed. The air above the valley was suddenly empty, but below the fight still raged. Emma rolled the Apache into a sharp descent toward Falcon 7's position, her sensors painting clusters of enemy ground forces pressing in on the squad. She loosed bursts from the 30mm cannon, walking the rounds with surgical precision into enemy cover, each strike tearing holes in the advancing lines, forcing the attackers to scatter. Falcon 7 moved quickly, now sprinting between outcroppings of rock toward their extraction point. Emma's eyes flicked between their movement and her targeting display. She eliminated threats in quick succession, a pickup truck mounting a heavy gun erupting in flames, an enemy position along a ridge collapsing under sustained fire. The ground force momentum was broken, and within minutes the squad had a clear path. The last of the hostiles began to fall back, slipping into the maze of the surrounding hills. Emma maintained overwatch until Falcon 7 confirmed their link-up with the extraction vehicle. The relief in the team leader's voice bled through the static. Valkyrie, whatever you just did up there, you saved every one of us. As the Apache turned for home, Emma finally allowed herself a long breath. The air was thick with the fading echoes of battle, the black columns of smoke marking where her unconventional tactics had rewritten the day the enemy fighters had entered the engagement. Certain of their dominance, they left in wreckage or retreat, and in their wake the old rulebook of helicopter combat lay in pieces.